All right. So, like I said, we're going to talk about building your financial first aid kit. So, today our agenda is to talk about the creators of this emergency kind of kit that we use for preparation for the financial first aid. We'll talk about the 4 basic steps of the financial first aid kit, different types of information that you'll need to gather, including household info, financial and legal info, medical info, and other contacts. We'll go over some resources, and then we'll leave time at the end for Q&A. So this presentation is based on a resource from FEMA, and there are a handful of copies available at our facility in Turtle Creek, so you're welcome to stop by and pick one up if you'd like. Otherwise, the ebook will be linked in the follow-up email that we send after our presentation today, and we'll include that link so you can access that. FEMA, of course, is the Federal Emergency Management Agency. They're a government agency whose mission is to make sure America is equipped to prepare for and respond to disasters. And we also have Operation Hope here. They're a nonprofit that provides financial literacy and empowerment and economic education to youth and adults. So, of course, before we start, we want to say if a disaster or emergency occurs, your first step should be ensuring your family's safety. And once the event has passed, then all of these records that we'll be talking about and this financial first aid kit can help with the recovery process. But of course, your safety is the most important thing. So the first step of emergency preparedness is to build an emergency fund. So everything we're talking about in this presentation is important if there's an emergency. But we want to put this early because a lot of people don't have one. So an emergency fund can help you pay for unplanned expenses, and it doesn't have to be related to a disaster. It could be something like your fridge stops working, or you need a car repair, and you need several $100s for that. So people say that you should save about 3 to 6 months worth of your expenses. So if you don't know how much you spend monthly, you might need to track how much you're spending for a month or two and then calculate out the total that you need for your emergency fund. These should be your bare minimum expenses like housing, utilities, food, medicines, etc. It's maybe not including monthly costs for things like movie tickets or going out with your friends. You also don't have to save it all at once. This is something that you'll set aside money for a little bit at a time until you get to that amount. But anything is better than nothing. So even if you can save $400, that's more than you had set aside before for new tires or x-rays and a cast if you break your arm. And the money you save may not cover an entire bill, but it's still much less debt that you'll be in later if you have to use a credit card or borrow money for the rest of that payment. And once you have an emergency fund, it's important to keep that money safe. So you want to get a savings account if you don't already have one and deposit that money in the bank. This is important, especially in the context of what we're talking about today. If you have physical cash on you in your home and then you are faced with something like a flood or a fire, you could lose that physical money. So a better idea is to keep it somewhere where we know it'll be safe. You can look into something like a high yield savings account because it will give you not only a safe place to keep your money, but a better interest rate. So your balance will grow faster over time. And of course, with an emergency fund, you want to use it if there is a need. I think a lot of people have money saved in an emergency fund and then they don't want to use it because then they'll lose their emergency funds. But if you're having a real emergency, then it's time to use that money and then replenish it once you use it. If you deposit money over time to build it up, then before you know it, you'll have your emergency savings back again. And you can pay attention to things like if you noticed that you wished you had more money when you ended up using it, then you can plan to increase the amount you're saving. And if your wages have gone up and you notice you're spending more money each month, then you can increase the amount that you've saved as well. I will pass it over to Katie. If I can go to the next slide. There we go.
All right, there are 4 basic steps we're going to look at today, and then we're going to talk about what those documents are that you need to be saving. So the first step we're going to look at is assessing and compiling which important documents we need to keep. Talk about reviewing those policies and paperwork to make sure we have accurate information. We'll look at how you can safeguard your documents in case you would actually need to pull on them. And then also how to update your kit going forward, because it's not a one and done thing. You need to update it regularly. So the first one we're going to look at is assessing and compiling. The booklet, whether you get a physical one from our place in Turtle Creek or you just use the electronic version, which we will send to you, has a lot of checklists in there, which are a really great guide to help you know what materials to gather. Consider a direct deposit. So if you get public benefit programs or even just your wages from your job, please consider doing direct deposit if you don't already have that set up. That will give you quicker and more flexible access to your money in case there is an emergency situation. So a great example of this, if you currently get a physical check that you have to take somewhere, whether it's Walmart for your check cashing or you go to a bank to cash that, if your community is flooded and you can't get to your house and your paycheck is sitting in your mailbox, there's no way for you to get to your money to then pay for things like a temporary hotel stay or setting up a temporary apartment. But if it had been direct deposited, you could have immediate access to that money. Also, if you're dealing with an emergency, you're probably not thinking about having to go into your job to pick up your paycheck. While you need that money, it's maybe not the thing at the top of your head that you're worrying about doing. So if you can do direct deposit for that or get your benefits on some type of card, that will just ease your stress level if you are dealing with an emergency. And then related to that, consider an online bill pay, whether that is getting your statements electronically from whoever you're paying your bills to, utilities or credit cards, and if you are able to set up an automatic payment for that. So this is useful if you have a consistent amount of money in your bank account and you are fine with them automatically taking that money out every month. That can ensure your bills are continuously paid if you are distracted in dealing with an emergency on the side instead. Because that will make sure nothing gets cut off. People who are looking for their money, like your mortgage company, they'll still get paid. So it's really useful if you can consider setting up that online bill pay and then also online access to your records. And then definitely make sure you know how to log into those systems. If you've got a sticky note on your fridge of all your passwords, but you can't get to your house, that's obviously not a helpful setup. So think about how you're going to access those if you can't do it from your house where you are usually accessing them. All right, and then the next slide, you want to think about documenting your possessions. You can take photos of things or record a video, stand in one corner of a room and like pan around the entire room and record that. You can also take photos of important documents and store them somewhere. And this can be helpful if something is lost or damaged. Your insurance company may want to know the condition of an item or the condition of your house in order to get you payments so that you can replace items. Some agencies will also accept a photo of a document to get you temporary assistance until you're able to provide them with like a replacement document or a physical copy of something. If you don't have access to some things that are important, like maybe you lost your social security card one time, probably want to get a replacement for that. And the booklet and later in our session, we'll talk about how you can replace some of those important documents. But if you've lost a social card, a birth certificate, if you want your marriage document for some reason and you don't have a copy, you want to think about how can I get a copy of that? And then where am I going to put it to keep it safe? And then the last piece is you want to keep some cash handy. And again, this is for emergency purposes. You're not going to grab your cash because you want to go out and eat dinner with your friends. And this is just if ATMs aren't working, maybe there's a power outage or banks aren't opening. If your community is flooded and you can't get to your bank because they're closed because they're also flooded, but you need to buy supplies for your house, if you have to go 3 communities away to hit a Walmart and you only ever use cash, there's you want to have that with you so that you can go because you can't go to your bank and get any money. This is not keeping your entire emergency fund on hand in cash because that's not a great idea, but it might be $100, it might be $200 that you keep handy somewhere, but you don't want your entire emergency fund like that because again, if your house is flooded or there is a fire, you would lose all of that cash. So just a little bit in case you can't get to a bank or ATM, but not your entire emergency. All right, and then we are going to look at reviewing our items. my computer isn't working now too with my notes. There we go. You want to review your insurance policies and any of your paperwork to make sure that they are accurate and up to date with any of the information that could be on there. So, an example, if you moved to a new house, you would want to make sure that your homeowner's insurance is covering that new house. It's going to be a new location in a new community, so they have to have your right address. Maybe you moved into a bigger house and you need to make sure that your insurance will cover the larger footprint of your house and the maybe greater amount of possessions that you'll have in it because now you have more space to store everything. And does your lease reflect your current rent? Some landlords, if you've been living in the same place for a while and your rent has either gone up or down, some landlords will write you a new one that will reflect that current amount, or they might just create a lease addendum for you, which is just like one extra page that says, from this date to this date, the new rent is whatever the new rent amount is. That can be handy because it can help establish residency and how much you're paying for your housing, because some assistance providers, if they're going to help you pay your rent during an emergency, they need documentation to prove what your current rent is. Also, it helps to prove that you have a written lease and you have access to that building in case your landlord would do anything shady. And then are other insurance things like your car or renter's insurance up to date? Again, if you've moved, you want that to reflect your current address. You want to make sure it's covering the amount of possessions you have, or if your vehicle type has changed, that it's covering maybe a more expensive vehicle. And then this website that's listed here, insurance.pa.gov/coverage, will have some tips on homeowners and renters insurance if you're trying to figure out how to get that for the first time or how to get that updated. If you check our YouTube page, which you'll get, the YouTube link for this. So just click around on our page for other things. We did an entire webinar, I think last year, on homeowners and renters insurance. If this is a totally new experience for you, there is some good basic information to get you started with that. So next is how to safeguard your files. If nothing else, a paper folder that just puts everything in one place is like the bare minimum for getting your financial first aid kit started. Something that will contain everything is easy to grab if you're like evacuating your house. A step up from that is a plastic type of folder that might repel a little bit of rain and keep your documents safe if there are weather conditions outside. It's not maybe necessarily completely waterproof if there's a massive flood, but it's going to be a little better than just a paper folder that might disintegrate if it gets too much water on it. But then the thing that you want to aim for is something like a fireproof box or a safe deposit box. And when you're shopping for a fireproof box, the different companies have different boxes that are rated how much heat and flame they can withstand during a fire, like how many hours it's okay that they'll last and keep your documents safe, how much smoke that they can protect your documents from. Some of them are even rated for water resistance as well. So if it's like floating around in your flooded house, how long will it maintain its structural integrity to keep your documents safe? You can also put your items in a safe deposit box. So this would be going to a bank. You're paying to rent a safe deposit box, but it keeps your documents safe there. They're not in your house in case you're worried about a fire. I would encourage you, any bank you're going to look at, ask them what their emergency procedures are to ensure that the bank is safe. If there is a community flood, what type of access will you have to get to your documents if that would be a concern for you? So always ask, especially because we're going to pay them for that safe deposit box. And something I learned today, if you are going to do the fireproof box in your house, some of them can grow mold on the inside because they're in this closed environment. So if moisture gets in there, your documents might get moldy. So what they recommend is get one of those little silica packets that will absorb moisture out of the air, throw it in your fireproof box. That should help with that. I get these a lot of the times when I buy a new pair of shoes. There's that little packet like in the box. You could just take it from that. You can buy this on Amazon also if you want to. But if you chuck that in there, it should also help keep your documents safe. And some companies recommend you open it for like 30 minutes every month to sort of air it out in case there would be moisture inside there. Those boxes usually have a lock on them, whether it's fireproof or safety deposit. So you would also want to make sure you have put your key somewhere where you're going to remember where to find it in case you are needing to run to the bank to get something, or you're grabbing your box on the way out of your house when you're evacuating, you would want to make sure you have the key to get back into it then. And then some other things on the next slide to think about. You could consider keeping electronic files, which you could either keep all electronic copies of things, or that might be a backup where you keep all your physical copies, but you've scanned everything and you keep an electronic copy stored somewhere. That might be on a USB that you keep in a safe place. It could be storing things in the cloud, whether that's your iCloud account, a Google Docs account, Microsoft has one. You will want to know how to access those files, whether you're going online or you're carrying around your USB or something. So know how to access those files. And if they're only electronic originally, do you want to keep a paper copy of them and keep a paper copy stored somewhere? Consider password protecting things. I know we all tend to write down passwords because there are a million of them that we have to memorize, but that is not always a safe way to do things. So if you're going to put a password on something, keep that password safe so it's not just like out in the open for anyone to find. You can even, if you share a computer with someone in your household, there's a way to password protect specific files or folders so that you could get in and access them, but whoever you're living with, if you don't want them to access your important information, they wouldn't be able to just go in. For some of the important documents, like maybe your advanced medical directive or your living will, you can check with your doctor's office if they're willing to store a copy of it, because especially for the medical directive that tells doctors and nurses what to do if you're having a medical emergency, they probably want access to that anyways. So you can see if they will take a copy of it. I literally went to a PCP one time and they're like, here's a packet, please fill it out and give it back to us. So they're probably more than happy to keep a copy of it, but just ask them the next time you're around them. And then consider finding a trusted contact. So this is someone, there is a lot of very personal information in this kit that you're going to put together that could lead to identity theft. So if you're going to give someone access to it, make sure you can trust them with all of that information. It might be a friend, it might be a family member. If you've got a financial manager or a lawyer, will they store a copy of anything? But please make sure it is someone that you definitely trust with all this information. If you have a sibling that is horrible with money and you don't want to give them access to your bank account, that's okay to not pick a family member. You might have a friend that you trust better. Don't feel guilty about not picking a certain person, because this is very important information that you need to make sure is kept safe and not stolen in some way. And then once we've done all that, you will want to update your kit regularly. At a bare minimum, you need to update this information once a year. And that is just going to be reading through all of the information that you had collected the year before and making any updates or replacing documents if you have new documents. And when you do that once a year is really up to you, whatever makes sense for your life. It could be during tax time because we all have to get a bunch of documents gathered anyways during tax time. And one of the things you're putting in your kit is your most recent tax return. So once you've done that and you've got your new tax return, add that to your kit and then review everything else that's in there to see if you need to update it. You could pick something like the start or end of daylight savings time, because it's always those 2 weird days during the year. You're already thinking about how this is a weird day. So maybe have that stick in your brain of, I'm also going to update my kit today. You could pick a time around your birthday as you're celebrating yourself. Celebrate your financial future by going through your kit. Or you could do something at the start of the year. If you're a person who likes to sit and plan out what the year is going to look like, plan out resolutions, that could be a good time to do that. If you're the type of person who is really gung-ho and plans a lot of resolutions and then doesn't follow through on them, maybe pick a different time of the year where you are more able to focus on putting this information together. So at minimum, we're doing once a year. But if there has been a major life change, you're going to need to update something in your kit. And so you also want to consider these times that are on the right side of the screen. If you've changed an insurance provider, you obviously want to take out the old insurance documents and put in the new ones, because if you you need to use your renter's insurance and you have old information, you're going to be out of luck. So swap out any new insurance information. If you've moved, update everything about where you now live. If you opened or closed bank accounts, again, you don't want to be trying to call a bank you no longer have a partnership with asking about your money. You want to call the one where your bank account information is. If you have had a change in marital status, whether you are newly married or you aren't anymore, if you're separated or divorced, you would want to update the information that way. If anyone has passed away from your household or there has been a new birth, you want to make sure those informations are changed. And even if you're fostering or adopting a child, you want to have the update information for that kid that is now in your household, because there's some kid information that you'll need to put in when we talk about contacts later. And then retirement planning, because you want to know how you're going to get your money in retirement. If you've got changes to a new employer has a new 401k, sometimes your 401ks get sold to a whole new company. You would want to make sure you've got the new information how to access that money, because we want our money to retire on. So those are the 4 steps of how you're going to build your kit. You're obviously going to collect all of your information, make sure that it is updated. We're going to safeguard it, and then we regularly need to update our kit. So the types of checklists that the book contains and that we're going to walk through include information such as your household information, any financial or legal documents that you might have, also medical information, because if you've got a chronic condition or you just want to be able to stay in touch with your doctor if there's been an emergency, you need to have that handy. And then some other important contacts for you to consider gathering information. So I think Annie is going to come back on and talk through those with you.
Yeah, so one thing we wanted to point out is that if there is some kind of disaster in the area, a lot of the documents that we're talking about today are also what you would need to apply for FEMA assistance. Um, or if you need to apply for any kind of public benefit and assistance programs. And also a lot of it is, as Katie mentioned before, what you need during tax time. So this is an example of one of the checklists that's included in this packet. So we can see here, we have a type of document where it'll show you the various types of files that we're trying to collect. You can mark off whether you have the item or whether it doesn't apply to you. So for example, if you don't drive, then maybe a driver's license doesn't apply, but you have a photo ID instead. It also has a space for you to list the date when this was added to your kit, so you know how often you need to replace it. So if your driver's license expires every 4 years, you can keep track of when the last time you updated that was. And that final square will describe the item or help you figure out how to find a replacement if you're not able to find one. So for household info, we want to make sure we're collecting this information so we can prove the identity of all household members after a disaster strikes. We can maintain or reestablish contact with family and other household members, and we can maintain contact with your employer or the employers of others in your household. So that information includes things like your documents, your photo IDs, your social security cards, if there are any child IDs or custody records, if there are marriage or divorce papers, your passport, any kind of naturalization papers, and also if you have any pet or service animal records, those would be included in the household info as well. And for contact info, you want to have information to reach you, your spouse or your partner, a child or any other household member, a residence and a mailing address, which are often the same, but if you have a PO box or somewhere else you receive mail, you want both listed in there. Employer info for anyone in the house who's employed, and then also an emergency contact who is not a member of your household that can be reached in the case of an emergency. So remember, if you don't have originals, you will want to get copies of these things. You want to make sure you have your vital records, and the toolkit that we're providing the link to and that we have the physical copies of in our office will explain by each kind of document where you can find these records. It might be the county courthouse or the Social Security Administration office. The next category is financial and legal information, and we want to collect this so we can identify your financial records and responsibilities. If you need to show proof of income for when you apply for assistance, To reestablish your financial accounts if your regular access methods are inaccessible. Again, if there's a disaster in the area and your bank closes down or you have to, use a different branch than normal, you'll have all the information you need there. To maintain payments and credit, and prevent any kind of service disruption, and communicate with companies that assist with recovery, like contacting your insurance company to discuss damages and repairs. And this is where we want to point out that if there is a disaster, you are still responsible for paying your mortgage regardless of the condition of your house or whether you can live in it. And you're also responsible for paying your credit card bills. So if you don't pay your bills, this can negatively affect your credit at a time when it's super important for you to have that credit. So you may want to ask your mortgage lender now, when there isn't an emergency, how they would handle emergency situations. This is also something that you can ask your landlord about if you're not a homeowner, just so you can be prepared if there was an emergency like this. How is that handled? But you want to make sure this isn't something that lapses. If there is a disaster, you still have to be paying, unfortunately, your mortgage and all those bills. So financial and legal information includes a few different categories we'll go through. Income, so your recent pay stubs, a summary of cash receipts, unemployment letters, a Compass document if you have that for different benefit programs, Social Security payments, veterans benefits, spousal or child support you receive. You also want to keep information for all your banking accounts, including what financial institution it's at, any prepaid cards you have, retirement accounts, or investment accounts. And this, we also, I think Katie mentioned earlier, keeping those yearly tax documents are also a good way to keep track of a lot of these items as well. You also have your insurance documents, so any photos, videos, or appraisals, insurance for your property, your home, or if you're a renter, auto insurance, life insurance, flood insurance, which is not included in home insurance, pet insurance, any kind of funeral benefit insurance, medical insurance, and then any financial obligations you have. So anything that you're still paying off, whether it's a lease or a mortgage, an auto loan, utilities, credit cards, student loans, child support, any automatic payments you make, you want to make sure that you have a record of these in your toolkit. And then for taxes, you want to keep returns from the previous year, federal, state, and local. You want to have information on your property tax and also your school district taxes if you own your home. You want to make sure you're keeping the tax return itself and the supporting documentation. So for example, the W-2 you get from working, whatever job you have, you'll get that W-2. You want to keep that, or at least a copy of that, with your records. Property tax information may come from the taxing entity itself, or you might get it on a 1098 mortgage interest statement. And then you also want to have your estate planning. So if you have a will or a trust, any powers of attorney that you have already done that paperwork for, or an advanced medical directive. And as Katie mentioned, your PCP might have a template you can fill out that'll help start thinking about those things. It's never too early to start thinking about a will or an advanced medical directive, just so you have those documents ready. For medical information, we want to keep things like our doctor's contact info, whether it's your primary care provider, any specialist that you see, your dentist, your optometrist, health insurance information, including copies of your insurance cards and pharmacy cards, and then any medical records that include things like allergies, immunizations, and medications are important for your toolkit here. And any medical equipment information, so models, serial numbers, and suppliers, if there's any medical equipment that you have in your home or on your person. You also want to have any caregiver agency contracts, disabilities documentation, and also your pet's medical information, especially their rabies vaccine or other vaccine statuses. It can be helpful to have those things if you have to temporarily, have them safe somewhere, whether it's in a shelter while you're finding, the next place that you'll be in after a disaster. And other contacts, if there are other important contacts you need to keep track of, you want to consider either putting a copy of their business card in your kit or adding the info to your cell phone contact list. This serves as a backup in case your address book or contacts lists are lost or destroyed. Also consider how your phone contact list is backed up. Do you have it backed up to iCloud or Google Contacts or something else? Is there a way to access that information from a computer if you don't have access to your phone anymore? That's something to keep in mind. Other important contacts might include landlord or mortgage representatives, healthcare providers, insurance agents. If you're receiving military benefits, the person who's in charge of that, any county assistance office for services that you might be receiving, a disability service provider or case manager, any assistive technology or durable medical equipment provider, lawyers, financial advisors, banking institutions, neighborhood, civic, and house of worship contacts, any of those that you feel it is important for you to have access to those if an emergency would happen. And we just want to bring up again, your kit contains a lot of really sensitive information, and if lost or stolen could lead to identity theft. So you want to make sure you're keeping it somewhere safe and only providing a copy to that trusted contact like Katie mentioned before. You don't want to reuse your passwords and pins or write them down. You don't want to share them with anyone, especially anyone claiming to be a representative. And you don't want to use something that's easily guessable, like a birthday, a phone number, a nickname, even pet names. I think that's probably a dangerous one that a lot of people go to. You want to make sure that all this information that you're gathering, you're keeping it safe. All right, this is our last slide here, which has some resources. We have ready.gov, which has numerous preparedness resources for your home and community. The Allegheny County Financial Empowerment Center, if you're looking for financial counseling assistance, like with budgeting or maybe staying on track to build your emergency fund, you can set up an appointment with them. They're at our office every, oh no, Wednesday. Is that right, Katie?
Yes, Wednesday.
Perfect. They're at our office in Turtle Creek every Wednesday, and they just have really great services for financial counseling, no matter what your financial situation is. And then, of course, the Human Services Center, we do these financial literacy webinars once a month, and in January, we do have a free tax prep site. We also will, as I think Katie mentioned, provide you with our link to our YouTube and the follow-up email, which will have this recording and also many other financial literacy webinars that we've recorded in the past. And now I will stop sharing my screen and we can take any questions you might have.